So all the people who came late are just going to miss the good stuff. I'm Caroline Miranda. I'm an arts and culture writer for the Los Angeles Times. I am beyond excited to be here today with two writers and artists who I have been reading for a very, very long time, and whose characters I've used as avatars on social media. That's on some of the earliest social media. That's how old I am. Anyway, just wanted to note that there will be a book signing following this session at Signing Area 3. If you go out the front and make a left, there's going to be a tent right there. Look for a tent marked special seller that has Jaime and Gilbert's books, and you can acquire them there. Otherwise, look for the Skylight Books tents, Skylight Books tent, which is also carrying a number of their books. So anyway, without further ado, I wanted to introduce the co-creators of the Love and Rockets series, which was first published in 1982 and has been in publication ever since. Love and Rockets has since gone on to become a flagship title for Fantagraphics, its publisher, and two of its original writers, and its most, because I believe your brother Mario was involved in some of the early issues, are Gilbert Hernandez and Jaime Hernandez. And just a couple of things on them. They are both recipients of Harvey Awards, Penn Center Awards. They're Will Eisner Hall of Famers. Too many awards to list here. They are the creators of some incredible worlds and some incredible characters, of Hoppers and Palomar, of Maggie and Hopi, and the enigmatic Luba, and I could not be more excited to be with them here in real life, not in a little box on Zoom, so thank you for coming out today as well. So, I wanted to start with the pandemic, because how can we not? What kind of work have you guys been making, if you've been making work during the pandemic? What have you been doing with yourselves? I'm going to start. Gilbert, you're close to the mic, so I'm going to start with you.
Well, it wasn't much different because it's the same process of doing comics. You're by yourself and you forget what day it is. And especially we're always on, finishing a deadline, and so you just focus on that. The pandemic was a pain in the ass, of course it was, but that was more about going out to your favorite restaurants or, stores and stuff. At first, the first year was really hard. I remember going to the supermarket and it was barren, like a science fiction movie. It is weird, we're in a science fiction movie where anybody can get it. It's a space disease out there, and anybody can get it, and it's worldwide, and people don't believe that it's happening, and all kinds of weird, goofy stuff like that. But it's dangerous, it's a serious thing. But as far as doing work, it is pretty much the same. I've always just ignored what's around us and just looked at the drawing board.
What about you, Jaime? Did it affect? Because I feel like I hear from a lot of writers that it has affected their ability to concentrate.
It affected me by the second, going on the third year. Is this on?
Yes.
Oh.
Pandemic junior year, you mean?
Yeah, and I was like, well, it's time to do the next issue, because we did a couple of
More than came out.
Time is a flat circle.
And I remember starting a comic and just going, I got nothing. I got nothing inside of here. And I kind of was worried because I would hear about it has been known to affect people's memory or whatever. And I was like, oh no, I'm one of those people. And I just realized I was just so out of practice that it just took me a long. It's almost like relearning how to do it.
Oh, interesting.
And I remember being scared, but it kind of, I caught up.
You caught up. Well, you said you were really busy right now.
Oh, you mean besides the comic?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean in producing comics, that you had been quiet for a time in the early pandemic, but then...
Yeah, but see, what I can't figure out was we were doing an issue. I don't know why it was so hard this recent. I can't figure it out. So I won't try to figure it out.
Have you seen any of it, any of what's happened over this last couple of years seeping into your work? And not necessarily that we might see a literal pandemic storyline in your work, but you know, I think there's been the psychological aspects, certainly the sci-fi aspects of inhabiting this world in which.
Okay, I've got a comic coming out, a side comic that is attached to Red Rock. It's called Psychodrama Illustrated, and basically it's about the subplot of it is about it's a zombie story. It's like a movie, a zombie story. But I just kind of called it The Plague, you know, sort of like a Walking Dead type scenario. But I didn't think that it would happen. You know, that the characters were talking about the plague and it's coming. No, we don't believe it. And it's exactly this. That's what I mean by a science fiction movie, because that's what how I wrote the story. But if you read it now, if you just change it, the word plague to pandemic, it just fits. It's just the creepiest thing, you know. So I think I caused it.
You heard it here, folks. Don't anyone tweet that, or else we'll have to explain. You guys have been working together a really long time, and it's so funny because when I first started reading your comics, at first it took me a little bit to realize, oh, it's like there's two artists. There was like, to me, even though there were stories that were very different and characters that were very different in your work, there was also the ways sometimes in which the characters related. And the way in which they inhabited their worlds felt like there was a familiarity between the two strains. What would you say, I'll start with you, Jaime, what would you say are your aesthetic overlaps as artists, and where do you think you're just completely...
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. I'll start with Jaime.
I think since we've been sharing the book for so many years, and we grew up together, and I learned from him, and everything, we share a certain connection, you know, that's unspoken, that we can't figure out how, but we do. And then, but as the years pass, you know, our lives start to drift. You know, even if we could text each other, hey, it still became kind of like we were doing our comics separately, and then now I don't see his work till the comic comes out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, most of the time. But it still works, and I don't know. It's just an interesting thing that I can trust it to work out. Even if, like this last one, I was like, I can't wait to read his work, you know, and like other people waiting for the comic.
Well, for me, it's that.
It was, what do you think are your aesthetic overlaps, and where do you guys think, where do you just completely break apart?
Well, I think over the years I've thought about it for 40 years, because people ask us, how is it you guys are completely different, yet there's this, you know, connection there, there's a flow there that fits, you know. I think it's just, I think we're just born amongst our siblings, we're wired closer together. I think simple as that. That's it. You know, he has his own complete view of how he wants to present the world, and I have mine. Yet it does have a connection. It does have we grew up reading the same comics, watching the same TV shows, watching the same movies. You know, just we got all the different influences. But even if we absorb them differently, somehow we just gravitated toward. Well, it's more fun writing stories about women. There was no thought about it. Other than, I would rather draw this woman than an alien, or a superhero, or whatever. This woman, I'll say, you know, she's, you know, even back then I thought, they're not going to accept her. But I didn't care. You know, I just put her in this story because it was sort of more, I was thinking more of films, like magic realism, I'm sorry. You know, the early, what do you call it? The Italian movies from the...
Like the neo-realism?
Neo-realism, sorry.
Italian neo-realism.
Yeah, see, that's the COVID part. So we do have memory lapses really short.
I'm also in my 50s, and I'm now just blaming all of it on COVID instead of being in my 50s.
So anyway, that's all. I think we're just wired similar, and we had similar backgrounds, you know, growing up. And we kind of, even as little kids, we would connect to certain things. You know, when we talk about things or have feelings about things, it was a little closer than we were with the other stuff, even though we're all pretty close in our way of thinking and feeling and all that stuff. but Hyman and I had a closer connection. I think it just happened that way. Yeah.
I feel that, so many artists that I interview, and especially graphic novelists, comic artists, you always hear the story about their youth when they were like obsessive drawers, like doodlers. I am by no means an artist, but I remember as a kid like obsessively drawing waterfalls. That was my thing, very bad waterfalls. What were the first things you guys obsessively drew?
Well, I think mainly because we had comics coming in the house, and that was kind of the birth of Marvel Comics. Of course, I always drew superheroes, or tried to. Spider-Man was hard because the webs, doing webs, But yeah, it was that. But then we were also obsessed over kid comics like Peanuts and Dennis the Menace comics and Archie comics and stuff. So we always drew our little gang, our gang kind of characters. I don't know. It was just draw whatever came to us. Also, watching my older brothers draw, it was like I want to do that too. They would slam the door, and I would have to go to my room.
What's the age difference between you?
Two and a half roughly.
Okay. So close enough to be wired together, but young enough for you to be like, get out of my
To have
face.
separate. Yeah. Yeah, I just drew monsters. I actually don't remember. My first comic book, I was 5 years old. It was called Spaceman. And like even to this day, it's like I would do a bunch of drawings of him. Like there was this big splash page, the helmet, and he's smiling. I don't know what he was looking at, but he was on the moon, I think. So it must have been looking at Earth, and that was it. That was done. That was all the writing I had in me. And I was 5, so I wasn't old enough to swipe yet. So I guess that, and then after that, I don't remember. I guess, like you said, did Spider-Man, and we didn't get the webs right. What was even harder to draw is The Thing. Man, every time the Thing from the Fantastic Four, I couldn't draw him.
I still can't draw.
I still can't. I don't know how the artists figured out those scales on him. Other characters that are very simplistic, we're talking about kid comics, like Dennis the Menace and Charlie Brown are really hard to draw. You can trace them, but all my Dennis the Menace drawings have been disasters, even to this
I've
day.
never drawn a good Dennis the Menace.
No, and Charlie Brown is like, no, it's just really hard. You really have to trace Charlie Brown to draw, and that's because the characters come from the artist's personalities, George Charles and Kevin, They designed them, and there it is. But it kind of happened the other way around too, because I've never seen anybody be able to draw Maggie or Opie like you do, unless it's a tracing copy. Right? And same with my blue person. I've never seen anybody approximate how I,
Yeah, one of the biggest compliments I ever got was Art Kukio Johnson, who was here yesterday. He did something for the Comics Journal cover, and he drew all these different characters. So he had to copy all these styles. And he said, just so you know, as simple as Maggie looks, boy, is she hard to draw. And I'm like, yes.
Now you've achieved master status. Were Latin American comics ever a factor? Like, some of the ones like Condorito, or I think of some of the Mexican graphic novel comics, did those factor into your diet at all?
Some, not as much as the American stuff, but like Mario collected Memi for a while.
Mimi, Biggie. And then there was that, we would just have, we had cousins who read comics, and they would leave them at our house, and they were from Mexico. And there was one called La Familia Buron. And it's just a silly little, funny comic, but it was drawn so funny. The art was, because, we didn't read Spanish, so we just made up our own stories, but we loved the way it was drawn. And we always thought, once we went back to reading Marvel DC or whatever, that was all, it became really stiff. If you looked at, funny comics and the way it's drawn, you start to absorb how they took care of stories. And then you go back to the Marvel DC, these guys are clueless. I mean, as far as culture, clothing and music and things like that, they just didn't, it was just a bunch of old guys who didn't know, but they had to put it in because it was youth culture, it's mid-60s. And whereas the kid comics, at least the Archie ones, they were very focused on getting the details right. Even if it's just Archie comics, you know, like Riverdale, the TV show, they really focused on this is what the girls music they listen to, this is the clothes they wore, because one of the artists for Archie his wife was a clothes designer, a real fashion designer. So she insisted the girls wore the right clothes, and they did. And so, you know, that's what made the comics unique to us. They go, this was closer to what we saw as, you know, teenage girls, even though it's a fantasy world, it's Archie, you know. But the art, well, and then at the time, Archie had really great artists. They were great draftsmen, and that inspired us more about storytelling than the Marvel DC stuff, the superhero stuff, because a lot of that stuff's disjointed. Because the Marvel style, I don't know if people know, is that the writer and the artist will have a meeting and they'll talk about what the issue's about. Then the artist will go home and draw the whole thing, but in pencil, and then the writer will get it back and he's going to put his own notes on it, and they'll change things and this and that. So it becomes kind of disjointed. I mean, it worked for them for a long time, but that's not a good way to do it. But you know, it worked for them. And I'm just saying that so a lot of their stuff was disjointed, and the way DC told Superman stories and stuff, it was disjointed like that. One second he's, you know, Clark Kent, and the next he's flying, and the next he's on another planet, and then the next he's in Mexico. You know, this is all on one page. That's fine when you're a little kid looking at that, but it doesn't flow. It's not good to study, I should say, you know. Whereas if you look at a kid comic, it's just panel. It's just told, you know, in each panel as it progresses, and if the artist is really good, which they were, that's what we absorb the most. So most of our storytelling and our styles comes from reading Archie comics, right?
Interesting. And those comics were very much about these interpersonal relationships between people, these jealousies, the popular kid, the unpopular kid, and so it's really interesting to think about how that.
But the writing was different. The writing was ours. That's why our stuff reads so it, you know, could be weird and like where these guys are coming from.
Yeah.
We would take that type of storytelling but put our writing to it. We never wrote like, I'm going to write an Archie story. It's pointless, you know. So.
Yeah. What, have you guys ever had a creative divorce where you're just like, that's it, this is over? I mean, you are brothers.
You mean just like, I don't want to do this anymore?
Well, together, yeah, because it's a lot. You guys have been doing this together for a long time. I mean, I think about, like, if my sister and I had to work together for 40 years, you know, I don't know that either of us would be alive.
Well, the cool thing is that we do our work separate. You know? And I know not to step on his toes when we're doing an issue like, maybe it should be about this or something. Because I know he knows what he's doing. And I kind of like that I can leave it alone. I thought you meant like quit comics. Period.
No, not quit comics, period, but I think quit working together, because that is a very intensive collaboration to maintain over a long period of time.
Yeah, but knowing that, you know, we could do it separately. I mean, because he, you know, as little kids even, you know, he drew his own comics, I drew my own. So that was the norm. So we don't think of it any other way.
Yeah.
So.
Like musicians who come together and.
Yeah, but if we worked together, we probably would have been over it in 10 years. I'm serious. It just wouldn't work. We have our own personalities, our own visions. It just worked out this way. Love and Rockets is an anomaly, really. It just would, there's hardly any other comic. I'll stick to comics that works that way. There might be that we just don't know, you know, that the creators are credited, but as far as I know, it is kind of strange how Love and Rockets turned out.
Yeah, it's really incredible. I'm sure that maybe your mom, who was like, why are you guys reading all those comics all the time? Like, did she ever regret that?
No, she's the one who,
she fed it?
she's the one who got us started on it.
Wow.
It was mostly to keep us quiet. Well, my dad, okay, here's the story. Mom liked comics in the old days, you know, when she was reading them, and she thought it was okay. And our brother Mario, he's 4 years older than me, so she would just like comics and would steal it. She'd be in the grocery store or something and see a comic that a character she remembered, and she didn't know how to read it. She let him. So he got into the collecting stuff. He is as a small kid, and since they were always around in the house, it was normal. So we didn't know we were weird having a house full of comics, you know, and focusing on them. So I don't know. It did.
I mean, I think one of the interesting things about going back, I was marinating in some of your work, some of the collections I have over the weekend, about how much contemporary politics and culture permeate your work. I think of punk music, the way punk music is so at the essence of some of the Maggie and Hopi stories, especially the early ones. You know, the politics of American intervention in Central America appear in the Palomar movie. So I'd love a sense, like, what cultural phenomena have you been feeding off in the last few years of your work? Because it is a very different time than it was then, and your comics have evolved a lot. I mean, do you think about that stuff very intentionally? Are you muse hounds? How do you approach that?
Well, for me, it's hard to put cultural moments in the comic because I've forgotten what year it is that they're living. Because it's supposed to be like they're living in real time. Well, the comic is a lot slower than real time. So sometimes I find myself 5 years behind. I go, well, I can't do this. I don't know when the pandemic is with my characters. You know, because I don't know what year it is with them. So I've had to leave out things, even if I'm sitting there going, like, oh God, I gotta address this, you know. And I go, well, did this already happen yet, you know?
Oh, in the timeline of it.
Yeah, and so I kind of keep the stuff timeless, you know, but kind of updated, you know. So it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, I'm not conscious of it. I don't start out a story thinking I'm going to address this political issue, this and that. I did a few things, because of Palomar, I just kept getting asked about how come there's no stories about the military? How come there's no stories about this? And I didn't want to do those, but at the same time I thought, well, you know, they might be right. I should address a couple of things. Only because it's such a big series. If I had one idea for a topic, I would have stuck to it. But since I made it so large, I had to include the world. So I've only done a few political stories, but they came as I was doing the story. It was about the characters, and then it came, or else a news item or something completely outrageous would happen in the world, and I would say, screw it, I'll throw out this plot and put that in, or at least mentioned in it. But I never intended to do anything political. We are so non-political. But the way the world is now, you have to pay attention. I mean, it's always been this way, but it's kind of sucking in.
I mean, but what's kind of interesting about your work is that there's not these literal references all the time, but in Palomar sometimes there are unspoken references, sometimes it's a political poster hanging on a wall. Like there are these things that kind of like permeate, that you know the stuff is kind of bubbling in the background even though it's not literal. So I was curious what kind of contemporary phenomenon are you interested in that regard, but it seems like everything.
Yeah, everything, but if it's important enough to us, we will address it somehow. Right? Even if it's just Maggie and Hopi talking about